Let's talk the top waiver wire options for Week 9. Next on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Welcome to FFT in 5. I'm Chris Towers. I'm here to talk about the Week 9 waiver wire options. But first, let's do some takeaways from Monday Night Football. And honestly, it was a pretty lousy game. I mean, the Lions did Lions things for the most part. Their defense played well. They head into the bye with a win. And Jahmyr Gibbs looked like an absolute superstar in this game. He had 189 total yards and a touchdown, 5 catches, rushed for 152 yards. Did all the things that we hoped Jahmyr Gibbs would do when he got the chance to be a lead back, and he's been pretty good since David Montgomery went out. The problem is, Lions are on a bye this week, and David Montgomery's probably back from that rib injury in Week 10, and it's very tough to know what this offense is going to look like in terms of that running back split, because Montgomery was really good before the bye. He wasn't efficient. He wasn't making big plays like Jahmyr Gibbs, but he was keeping the offense on track. He was moving the chains, and that's something that this offensive coaching staff clearly values. So I do think when we get to, coming back from the bye in Week 10, David Montgomery's probably still going to be the lead back, and he's probably still going to be a touchdown-dependent, high-end RB2. But I think Gibbs is going to be right there in that range with him in the rankings. There's room for both of these guys to be very good. You saw this week, obviously it was a blowout, but Craig Reynolds got 14 carries for 74 yards and a catch for 12. I think he had a touchdown called back by a penalty as well. So there should be room for both Montgomery and Gibbs to be very solid starting RB2s. Maybe you can sell high on Gibbs coming off of this game, but given the bye situation in Week 9, I think it's unlikely you're going to get enough to justify moving him. If I could turn him into Tony Pollard, I would do that. That's one that I would definitely do. But otherwise, I'm not sure there's an obvious trade for Jahmyr Gibbs that makes a ton of sense. Rest of the offense, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6 catches for 108 yards despite dealing with that illness coming into the game. He looked great. Sam Laporta, 8 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. He's awesome. Nobody else in this offense really matters. Josh Reynolds down to 1 catch in this game. On the other side, I mean, the Raiders, God, what a disaster. Jimmy Garoppolo came back from his back injury, but he was just dreadful. He was under pressure constantly. He went 10 for 21 for 126 yards. They only had 21 pass attempts and 18 rushes. Add the 6 sacks, and that's what, 43 plays on offense today? I mean, it was a miserable game all around for the Raiders. They couldn't do anything outside of one drive where they got the running game going. And Josh Jacobs did have 16.8 PPR points. That was a good game. And what we're starting to see is, even though this offense isn't great, his role is really good. And we're starting to see that reflected in his fantasy production, even though it's not leading to the, consistent top 5 finishes like we saw last season. The rest of this offense, I mean, the 3 guys we care about in this offense outside of Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, and Michael Mayer, combined for 3 catches for 49 yards between them. Garoppolo might not have been healthy. This offensive line looks really bad, and it was just a really bad matchup. The Lions are a team that can generate a lot of pressure with just 4 pass rushers, and that's an easy way to beat most offenses, but especially one like this. Problem is they've got the Giants in Week 9. That's a really good matchup. Can you trust Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams with the way this passing game looks? I think Michael Mayer, he's had some good signs this season, but overall the role hasn't been there. So I think we can probably go ahead and drop him, especially if you can get Trey McBride. I think Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers are in that wide receiver 2 to 3 range for next week. I think we'll get a bounce back game from this offense against the Giants, but yeah, it's pretty brutal right now in Las Vegas. And let's move on to the top waiver wire options for Week 9. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on it because it's just not a great crop. I spoke with Jamie Eisenberg before recording. He sent me his top 5 options, and 3 of them for Week 9 are tight ends, which gives you an idea of where things are. Now, that being said, there are a lot of tight ends on bye in Week 9 who we would otherwise be using. Sam Laporta's on bye. Evan Ingram's on bye. George Kittle's on bye. Darren Waller and Gerald Everett are dealing with injuries, so it might be a situation where you do need a tight end, in which case Trey McBride, 33% rostered. I think he's the top waiver wire target for Week 9 at any position. unless you need a quarterback, in which case, go get Gardner Minshew. 38% rostered. He is a top 10 quarterback for me heading into a matchup against Carolina, who are like only 12th in terms of, or only bottom 12 in terms of fantasy points allowed, fewest fantasy points allowed, I mean. But this is a team that is bottom 10 in yards per attempt to quarterbacks. They are bottom 10 in touchdown percentage. They just haven't had teams throw all that often against them. And the Colts are very much a team that could just run the ball, but they play very fast. They get a lot of snaps out there. And so I do think, Minshew's thrown 40-plus passes in 3 of his 4 games. I do think this is a situation where Gardner Minshew can be a very, very good fantasy option in Week 9. And then Jahan Dotson, 47% rostered. We saw his best game of the season, 8 catches, 100-plus yards, and a touchdown. It's the breakout game we were hoping to see from him back in Week 1 and Week 2 that we haven't gotten. And, I will point out the Commanders dropped back, I think, 55% of the time in this one. They dropped back 55 times against the Eagles in Week 8. So Dotson's target per route run rate was only 20%. That's still not great, but look, it's a talented young player who is widely available now, 53% available in CBS fantasy leagues, who showed some upside finally. So that's worth chasing, especially in a week where there aren't a lot of obvious must-add options on the waiver wire. So that's going to do it for FFT and 5. Make sure you listen to the full episode of Fantasy Football Today for an in-depth breakdown of the waiver wire options, and we'll see you tomorrow.